This is Steve Zelser with Workweek, and this week we're going to be talking about the very important case at San Francisco State of concerning the AMED program and Professor Rabab Abdulhadi and Professor Tomomi Kinukawa, who have been struggling to defend the AMED program and have actually been censored by Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook, and have also faced really collusion by the president of the university with these companies, refusing to fight them, and the people that have been interested in censoring them. So this is what we're going to be looking at this show. And joining us, Professor Rabab Abdulhadi. She's chair at San Francisco State of the AMED program. Professor Tomomi Kinukawa, who's also a professor, ethnic studies. Professor Ann Robertson, who's a member of the California Faculty Association. They're all members, but she's a delegate also to the Labor Council. James Martel, who's president of the California Faculty Association at San Francisco State. And Lisa Milos, who's a member of the CWA UPTE UC, and she's a delegate to the San Francisco Labor Council. So welcome all of you to this show about the struggle at San Francisco State.
Thank you for.
Okay, well, why don't we first start with the establishment of the program at San Francisco State, what was promised to Professor Rabab Abdulhadi, and what happened in the course of trying to develop that program at San Francisco State.
Actually, this goes back to 2002, when there were fights on campus between Palestinian students who were protesting an Israeli, quote-unquote, Israeli Independence Day event, which was the Nakba, the Palestinian Nakba, the history of the displacement of almost 750,000 Palestinians from their land when Israel was founded in 1948. There was a task force that was founded. Palestinian students were sanctioned. There was a task force that was funded by the university president. The task force specifically recommended that the university, it was about 200 people. First, it started by small, and there was no representation from Arab, Muslim, Palestinian communities or other indigenous or communities of color. But then more and more people shared, and then there was a recommendation saying that there should be at least two departments set, two programs set and developed. One is Department of Jewish Studies, and another is Department of Arab, and they said Islamic Studies. And in our case, they were recommended that the hiring of a senior faculty member who could advise the students and also build the program, that becomes part of the discussion. I should also say that many people who were in the task force, also some of them were involved in the 1968 strike. Some of them were involved in community organizing, whether it is in the Arab, Palestinian, Muslim community, such as Jamal Dajani, who is a trustee of the Arab Cultural Community Center, Pastor Michael Yoshi, who has just retired as pastor of the Buena Vista United Methodist Church, and many others who have spoken, Abir Rafidi, and many others who have spoken up about that. Now, fast forward to 2005, I was recruited by San Francisco State. I was directing the Center for Arab American Studies at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. San Francisco State Dean Ken Montero, the retired Dean of the College of Ethnic Studies, approached me in 2005, asking me if I could give advice on the program they wanted to set, and I said, sure. And then in the process, he said, would you be interested? And I said, well, I have a program here. I would be interested if you are going to provide a critical mass and if you're going to be supportive of this program. I'm not going to come by myself to build the program. You can't have a program built. And I explained to him what I already had at Michigan. I had 3 faculty members. We had suite of offices. We had funded. We had continuous administrative assistant. We had a lot of support from the University of Michigan for the program. So I said, at the very least, you need to match or do better than the conditions that I have now. In the process of negotiations, finally we agreed, and we came in October 2006 to an agreement for the job offer that was offered to me by President Corrigan, and the memorandum of understanding that Dean Montero drafted that was approved by the provost and the president, and thus the university funding budget, that they will hire me and 2 other faculty members at the assistant professor level, and they will make the funding. This means continuous funding. This doesn't mean occasional, one time and then they stop. They offered funding for 3 years for initial funding of the program. They also, I mean, the only thing that actually I guess I didn't get was I asked for the standard of living adjustment from Dearborn, Michigan to San Francisco, because San Francisco was much more expensive. And Dean Montero said to me, we can't do that. We cannot afford to do that. I said, okay, San Francisco State is the home of the 1968 strike. I was so excited about what was going on and the possibility of building a program that's not only Arab American, but Arab ethnicities and diasporas, connecting with people in the San Francisco Bay Area and so on. So I said, okay, I'll take that hit in the salary and I will come. And we started building the program. The problem is that the Zionist groups have, Israel lobby, have tried to attack again and again and again, and they have been targeting the program. And as a result, the university administration, the president, 3 presidents now, Corrigan, Wong, and President Mahoney, have fought against the program. President Wong canceled our searches. In 2010, 2011, they basically stopped funding completely, even for lectures in the searches. That at that time, the initial grant has stopped. So from, let's say, from 2010, 2011, I have been one faculty member trying to build a program in an environment that is Islamophobic, that is anti-Arab, that's hostile to Palestine, and thus there was the need for the program to start with. By the way, I should also say that the Department of Jewish Studies was built, a program was built, and now it's a full department with at least 7 faculty, I think 3 or 4 endowed faculty lines in Israeli studies. And so our program never actually was able. We built it. We built a minor, academic minor. We have 22 courses. We have the Edward Said Scholarship. We have the Memorandum of Understanding with An-Najah National University. We do amazing open classrooms that get attended by thousands of people. We have delegations to Palestine. We connect. And the whole question of AMED, and I will end with that, is that our motto is the indivisibility of justice, that we produce justice-centered knowledge production, that we connect with all sorts of issues of justice. We're not only focusing on justice in for Palestine, but we believe in just gender and sexual justice. We are here discussing labor justice, labor rights. We talk about food security. We talk environmental justice. We are against militarization and violence. We're against xenophobia. So we are actually all around very much, I believe, building the program in the spirit of 68, in the spirit of all of you striking in 1968, led by the Black Student Union and the Third World Liberation Front, and a huge coalition of people that brought about the foundation of the College of Ethnic Studies in 1969. And we feel in AMED we are inspired, and we should be. I was promised to be the 5th department in the College of Ethnic Studies. And now, 15 years down the line, I'm still one faculty member that has been targeted. The program has been targeted. Our classes have been canceled. The university has been actually colluding clearly and overtly now with Zionist groups and so on, intent to shutting down the program. So this is in a nutshell, but we're here and we're here to stay.
And I would add that I was in the strike at San Francisco State, and I never experienced a case where people were targeted personally, professor, faculty, students, with posters saying that they were terrorists. This is unheard of, even in 68. And in 68, there was a struggle for the right of ethnic communities to have their history reflected. And that is what came out of the strike. One of the things that came out of the strike, the Ethnic Studies Department, the right of telling the story of peoples in this country, immigrants and from around the world. So you were targeted, the program was targeted, but you continued to build the program, continued to develop it despite these attacks. And you had a program during the COVID pandemic online, and you were assisted or collaborated with Professor Tomomi Kinukawa of that program. Why don't you talk about that panel that you had that led to Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube canceling a university college program at San Francisco State?
Start and then pass it on to Professor Kinukawa, because he was a faculty lecturer in women and gender studies. It was actually Professor Kinukawa's initiative. Professor Kinukawa reached out to me and said, can you come and speak as a guest speaker in my class? I know you're very busy, but would you come? And Professor Kinukawa was teaching 2 sections of Women and Gender Studies 150, the history US, Women and Gender in US History and Society. Would you be able to come and speak about Palestinian, Arab, Muslim communities, the whole question of feminist and queer justice? And I said, this is, of course, I'm honored to do that, and I will be willing. So how about we actually do that as maybe kind of like collaboration? And so we proceeded with that. I will pass it on to Professor Kinukawa because it was really their own initiative to speak about that. And then maybe we can talk about the censorship afterwards. And I would just want to say, I know Professor Kinukawa might forget, but tomorrow is Professor Kinukawa's grievance hearing over the silencing. So we want everybody to come and attend and participate and share in the support and the holding San Francisco State accountable for their violation of our academic freedom. So I'll pass it on to my colleague, Professor Kinukawa.
Yes, I had a great honor to collaborate with Dr. Abdulhadi and got to co-organize like the 10 open classrooms, AMED open classrooms on gender and sexual justice in Palestine and Arab and Muslim communities. And so myself and students were introduced into the AMED critical pedagogy, which Dr. Abdulhadi has developed over decades. So we have done 10 open classrooms over 5 semesters so far. And one of the open classrooms that we did on September 23rd, 2020, that was silenced by the SFSU administration and Zoom and other and Zionist organizations and other corporate media. So the open classroom, that open classroom was titled "Whose Narratives, Gender Justice and Resistance: A Conversation with Leila Khaled," and we got to invite amazing guest speakers, like really the revolutionaries and thinkers of our time, and it was going to be a really historical conversation, which like all of us students and I myself are really looking forward to. And so the class was part of this the series where we were thinking about, we were trying to like restore or like centralize decolonizing narratives, feminist narratives, which often are suppressed in the dominant, narratives of the history. And it's essentially like 9 days prior to the silenced class, the right-wing Zionist advocacy group Lawfare Project sent a letter to the Department of Justice alleging that our open classroom violates US anti-terrorist law and counts as a material support for terrorism. And then 3 days later, Zoom, under Zionist pressure, threatened to cancel our webinar. And then in her email to both Dr. Abdulhadi and myself on September 18th, Provost Jennifer Summit, in her official capacity as Vice President for Academic Affairs, and citing no legal counsel, parroted the same false charges of material support for terrorism levied against Dr. Abdulhadi and myself, and also mentioned a possible imprisonment. So instead of protecting our academic freedom, the provost stated that we need to seek legal advice from a knowledgeable attorney, and also we must assess the risk on our own. And then ultimately, less than 2 days before the class, Zoom canceled the class. At that point, we had 1,500 registrants from the community who were interested in the class, but the class was canceled, and Zoom sent out the cancellation emails under Dr. Abdulhadi's name, although we were not notified that. Dr. Abdulhadi, would you like to?
We actually did ask for support from the university. I should say that Provost Summit also spoke at the University Senate meeting. We weren't notified that there was going to be a Senate meeting. She called this controversial. Provost Summit and President Mahoney both claimed that they supported academic freedom. However, it's one thing to actually have things in lip service. It's another thing in terms of deeds. We asked for the names of the over 1,400, 1,500 registrants, especially many of them were our students, and they were coming in our classes to attend. And until today, by the way, it's been more than a year now, almost 2 years. We have not received the names. We requested them several times to contact with our students. So we were actually trying to run the webinar, at the same time trying to contact with students and other people, including, by the way, many of the Zionist organizations who said they wanted to attend. And they will say, why don't you ask Leila Khaled this? I said, why don't you come and ask herself, yourself? These speakers are all open to discussing everything. Come and ask. But also President Mahoney had already also wrote 3 statements on September 5th, I think September 18th, September 14th and September 23rd, in which she reiterated all the Zionist talk about us. For example, she talks about the glorification of terrorism. If you go to the page that the Canary Mission, which is a shadowy, very bad organization that targets people, they have a title under my name, Glorifying Terrorism. There is actually, not a lot of the stuff that President Mahoney was saying were actually reproduction of many of the Zionist groups. The way they were describing us, they remember you mentioned the Horowitz posters, for example, they called us Jew hatred. And one of the main campaigns that was organizing along with the Left Project was called Stop Jew Hatred. There was an app organized by the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs and the Herzliya, very important center for strategic thinking in Israel, which is one of the main think tanks for Zionism and the Israeli government, called ACT-IL. They bragged that they sent 19,000 messages to Zoom, Facebook, and other social media. And in there, the problem is that we know that the Zionists are attacking us and we're standing up, and they would like to censor and silence any kind of discussions of Palestine, because they are afraid if the narrative around Palestine comes out, people will identify more and understand the reason for justice and for Palestine. Our university president not only sided with that narrative in several statements that she made, but she also never reached out, neither to me nor to Professor Kinukawa, for the whole period. Not once did she or the provost email us. The only thing we received from the provost is that threatening email that we might go to prison and we should find our own lawyers. That's it. Go find your own lawyers. And actually, we did write back and say we need support from the university. We need legal support from the university, because we were afraid that we will be picked up and thrown in prison. Because, I mean, this is kind of, we knew that it doesn't really make sense. And we spent about 2 months trying to find lawyers who can actually testify that we're not violating any laws. And the CSU itself, their lawyers themselves actually acknowledged that we were not violating any laws. At that point, the university should have made it possible for us to be able to have the classes, except what the university did is that they sold us lip service, saying that we support academic freedom, but meanwhile, everything in their deeds they did to block and stop, and did not say any single word in our defense. We have been smeared, we have been bullied, there has been character assassination against the two of us, and not in a single instance that anybody in the university officials, not a single one, has stood up to actually speak and defend us and say, or I even ask us a question, what are you thinking? Why did you do this class? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you in your right mind or something? Nobody did that to us. And even after all of this has happened, President Mahoney participated in a Zionist rally on September 23rd, on the same day that we were shut down, participated and spoke, and the university co-sponsored the Zionist rally with funding, and in which the Israeli consulate also was part of, and as well as the Jewish Community Relations Council. They participated together in order to trash us, in order to talk about glorifying terrorism and so on. And President Mahoney not once did reach out to Professor Kinukawa. She actually put together some kind of a group meeting and so on. People who are not even in our community of AMED and so on, brought in some students went to attend, feminist and queer students. And actually it's all these young students sitting, majority women, majority wearing the hijab, sitting there, and the president's guest insulted them with the F word, not the president, not the provost, not the dean of students, not the head of the equity, diversity, and inclusion that supported the Zionist rally, stood up for the students and told the guests that you should not be treating the student this way, you should not be insulting them and offending them. So when we're talking about really, it's about a pattern. I mean, this was really a huge event, but this is a pattern that we're talking about, which necessitates why we need the AMED Studies program in the first place, to educate, teach, and about all of this.
Okay, we've been speaking with Professor Rabab Abdulhadi and Professor Tomomi Kinukawa on Work Week, and we wanted to hear the labor part of this, because the issue of free speech, the issue of academic rights, the issue of a contract, keeping a contract, an agreement that the university made, is a labor issue. And joining us as well is James Martel. James, maybe you can talk about how the union became involved in this whole struggle to defend Professor Abdulhadi and the program at San Francisco State.
Sure. Yeah, we've been involved for quite a while because, you know, as long as Dr. Abdulhadi has been here, there's been this problem, except for, I think, a very brief early period. So I've worked with her on many different issues on, you know, but above all on the breach of contract issue, where she, you know, was hired under certain expectations and those expectations were not realized, which is basically just against the law, period. It's pretty open and shut. So we did have a statutory grievance about that not that long ago, and the faculty panel unanimously ruled in her favor, which was a great victory and a great sign of faculty self-governance kind of standing up for itself. And unfortunately, the president vetoed that, just as she vetoed the earlier victory about Dr. Abdulhadi's own case about Zoom canceling the webinar. So that's 2 cancellations. Both have been appealed and both will go to arbitration. So that, and that arbitration cannot be appealed itself. And I feel hopeful and maybe even slightly confident that in both cases the arbiter will rule on our side, because it's very much to me it's very much of an open and shut case in both cases. Dr. Abdulhadi's contract was breached, and her and Dr. Kinukawa's academic freedom rights were violated very clearly to me. Just to say a tiny bit more about that issue specifically, we academic freedom is in the preamble to our contract, so it is in a way it is a protected interest. Unfortunately, it's not spelled out in any specific articles, but it is still part of the contract, and therefore, that's part of our grievance, was that academic freedom is one of the most important things that a university must protect. I think in particular, the fact that the Professors Abdulhadi and Kinukawa got a email saying that they were potentially going to go to jail for doing this, I thought was really an egregious violation of academic freedom. Rather than helping them, the university basically effectively threatened them, and incorrectly, by the way, because there was absolutely no aiding and abetting or any violation of this policy. So and that's why tomorrow we're going to have another statutory hearing where these kind of issues are going to be worked out. And the union has been backing both of these professors to the hilt, because we think academic freedom is one of the most important values that you can have, and without it, you don't really have a public university. To me, academic freedom is meaningless if you just support it in lip service, but in a particularly difficult case such as this one, you don't do everything in your power to support it. And I think that's where the university failed. They didn't do everything in their power to make it possible. And by the way, they still haven't done anything to help make this webinar possible.
It seems that they, despite the attack on academic freedom and their rights to have a program there and have the faculty and staff, they really have another agenda. And maybe you can talk, Professor Martel, about the resolutions you passed by your chapter, and also to the Labor Council over this issue.
Passed resolutions supporting both Professor Abdulhadi and Kinukawa's rights to academic freedom. We passed a resolution in conjunction with the San Francisco Labor Council. That's part of our work. Passing resolutions is part of our work, but part of our work is also organizing and trying to help out with these grievances, which is a union process after all these statutory grievances. Just working with both of them, I think one of the things that I find particularly egregious was that the university at several points told Professors Abdulhadi and Kinukawa that they should get their own lawyers and that they were sort of on their own. And to me, that's really terrible. An administration should be, they're not lawyers themselves. They don't know what to do. They had to, you can't just go and find lawyers, and it costs money, and you need to find the right one, and that they have all the resources, and yet they threw this on these two individuals. So that's why we want the union to sort of stand as a counterweight, because we do have some resources and we do want to throw them behind these faculty members to sort of countervail that failure to stand up for them. So we're trying to take the place of that, both through public proclamations like these resolutions, but also some behind the scenes negotiating and through the statutory hearing process itself.
And has this happened at other universities? Because it seems like the issue of academic freedom, the right of the faculty of not just San Francisco State, but other state universities, UC, are threatened if Zoom, if Facebook, and YouTube get away with this. And also, the university has a contract with Zoom. So did they demand that Zoom not do this censoring and apologize for that?
They did not. And you raise a deeper point, which is, I don't think private companies should have any business in determining what academics do and don't do, because they're always going to take their own bottom line and their profits and whatever over and above academic freedom. The reason that we have public universities is because they are dedicated to the principles of that make academics what it is, a protected, free space where students can learn and professors can exchange ideas and all of that. So Zoom is not interested in any of that. Zoom is just interested in money. So they're not a reliable partner. And I think we really need to work on alternatives to private corporations insofar as Zoom has become such a big part of academic life since the pandemic. And I unfortunately believe that it will continue to be a big part of academic life after the pandemic.
We're speaking with Professor James Martel. He's the president of the San Francisco State Chapter of California Faculty Association. And you sent this resolution you sent a number to the San Francisco Labor Council. And also joining us is Ann Robertson, who is the CFA faculty member from San Francisco State on the San Francisco Labor Council. Ann, your thoughts on this struggle, not only at San Francisco State, but in the San Francisco labor movement and labor in general?
I agree with everything Professor Martel just said. All of the points were well taken. What happened at San Francisco State is our CFA executive board passed a resolution unanimously condemning the administration for not taking more steps towards finding an alternative platform to have this panel discussion. And we also condemned the fact that the university was engaging in a breach of contract, breaking the promise that they originally made to Professor Abdulhadi about the nature of the program she would be joining. So the resolution was passed unanimously by our executive board. I took it to the San Francisco Labor Council, and the Labor Council then endorsed the resolution. According to the chair of the Labor Council, it was a unanimous endorsement. So it was a resounding support from the Labor Council to Professor Abdulhadi and Professor Kinukawa.
This issue of attacks on Palestinians, both in Palestine and in San Francisco and around the country, seems like it's a systemic problem. And do you feel that there's an attack on Palestinian professors and critics of Israel, for that matter?
Well, it certainly is a systemic problem. It's been going on at San Francisco State for years, and with the administration doing little to protect, for example, Professor Abdulhadi from hate speech, et cetera. But we've also gotten reports that people on other campuses are up against the same kind of lack of support from their administrations in terms of their free speech. And so it's been an ongoing crisis, I would say, for years.
Also joining us is Lisa Milos. She's a delegate at the San Francisco Labor Council who has been active in supporting Palestinian rights. And you supported the resolution that recently came up and was passed unanimously. But also there have been some other struggles in the Labor Council about even having the right to have a discussion on defense of Palestinians. Lisa, do you want to talk about some of this history?
On June 2nd, my union, UPTE CWA 9119, is representing 15,000 workers of University of California, passed a resolution in support of the Palestinian and in support of BDS and support of stopping aid to Israel, and also in support of withdrawing any kind of links or support with Histodat, the the union that that Israeli apartheid uses, or trade union that has been used by the Israeli apartheid to segregate workers, to keep Palestinian workers in only certain fields like construction, to basically, that union has been very instrumental in actually installing the apartheid systems from the beginning. And so, if any union really believes in the equal representation and the rights of workers, they would not be supporting the Histadrut in any way. And so our union passed a resolution on June 2nd. I went to the Labor Council and I spoke with certain delegates who, and I wanted to present our resolution, but many delegates who joined me in Zoom calls for us to talk about this, they said that having the word Histadrut would most likely not really help us in being able to get enough delegates together to support a resolution on Palestine. So we decided that we were going to be drafting a different resolution among us, the different delegates. I think at one time we had at least 25 people. Am I correct, Steve? I forget. 20 to 25 people involved in the meetings. Maybe we started smaller, but then we got a little bit larger. And we drafted a resolution in support of Palestine that we presented on June 14th. In June 14th, basically we got lambasted. It got sent to committee. The committee was being chaired. They chose the chairs who are precisely in favor of Israeli apartheid. In fact, Olga Miranda, SEIU Local 87, who's also the treasurer and who's running for treasurer now as well. She was in an article in 2016 directly supporting Israeli apartheid. So there's no secret the fact that these people also support apartheid. She's the one that was able to move it to committee. Susanna, I'm sorry, the other person who was chairing was from the UESF. However, she had not been elected as a delegate this time around. She was now, or in the process of retiring, and she was still chosen as chair because she was part of the executive committee. So she was chosen as chair, Susan Solomon, and she has never supported Palestine either. So we had heard at that time that there was a whole new set of delegates coming in from UESF, United Educators of San Francisco, whom had been part of the May 19th resolution that they had passed as a delegates assembly in support of Palestine. And that, so we were hopeful that they were going to be coming in July. However, there was decisions made by the UESF leadership not to come in to the council in July, whether it was from the leadership of the UESF or from the San Francisco Labor Council, that has not been made clear to me, but they did not join the Labor Council in July. And then we had a lack of quorum, I believe, in August. And then we had, I believe we had September was also lack of quorum, I forget. When we finally had a meeting in October, they were imposing an in-person meeting for the following one. There was like 3 months where we were not even able to meet because of lack of quorum or from because they wanted to have in-person meetings. And we were saying we wanted either hybrid, and we wanted at one of the meetings, I believe it was the meeting in October, we were demanding that the meetings were either hybrid with Zoom and in person, or Zoom, because there were still several members of the council who are not in any condition to be able to be present in person at any of these meetings because of either the situation being immuno.
I understand there was a resolution from the AFL-CIO saying that
that's exactly what happened. Yes, thanks for reminding me. Yes, sorry, thanks for reminding me. In September, we received a letter, and we were informed of this. We received a letter a copy of the letter that the AFL-CIO National had sent to the Labor Council, saying, basically telling the Labor Council leadership that we could not pass any resolutions of an international nature on policies of which the national AFL-CIO has already decided, has already taken a position on. So we were being hit by all sides. And also we had Rudy Gonzalez from Building and Trades making comments, public comments in one of the Jewish journals, saying the BDS is out even before any kind of conversation, even before any reports were being made to the Labor Council Committee, to the delegates regarding the committee here meetings. And we were demanding that during the time we should have education. So within my union, UPTE, we had 2 educational sessions. We had August and September, one showing a film to our members and inviting the public. One of them was Gaza Fights for Freedom, and there was another one as well. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting exactly, but we had people coming in, and we had guest speakers coming in. One of them was Abby Martin's partner. I forget, Michael Preisner. I think I forget his name exactly. I'm so sorry. But so we had that resolution. So part of that both the anti-democratic nature in which the October meeting was held at the Labor Council, where they basically stopped any kind of counter arguments. They did not even allow a counter argument regarding the hybrid meetings. So hold on a second, 1 second. I'm getting mistaken the date. October, we voted in favor of having hybrid meetings. The delegates voted, we won that vote. In November, they stopped that vote. They stacked it with bringing in people, and they went counter to that, and they decided that the December would have to be in person. They did not allow for any kind of discussion. So we have not gotten a report about the so-called Palestine Resolution Committee.
Okay.
We haven't gotten anything.
But there was no opposition to this resolution concerning Professor Abdulhadi and the AMED program.
No, that resolution passed unanimously, which was very interesting. And I'm glad, because basically it would look pretty bad for them to not support, a distinguished professor and the academic freedom of and upholding the contract that Professor Rabab Abdulhadi has with San Francisco State. Okay. So it would have looked, I think they would have looked really bad if they had not done so.
This is obviously a continuing discussion in the San Francisco labor movement and nationally. What are the lessons of this? Because there was an article in the San Francisco Chronicle about the case, and it is of national importance, obviously, to faculty all over the country, of censorship and suppression of the right of academics to present their views, and also the attack on Palestinian professors and academics. I think they want you to go, Professor Abdulhadi. For a long time, it seems like they spent a lot of money and effort to try to drive you out of the San Francisco State.
I'm going to start by saying, thanking the people who are here and the people who are not here who have been really supportive. So I really begin, and I've met James Martel back in 2016. And I met James Martel through actually 2 union members, leaders of the California Faculty Association, who had gone on the delegation on the first US prisoners labor academic solidarity delegation to Palestine. And we went to Palestine, and we were at the time involved in a labor struggle in San Francisco State and throughout CFA. And we were wearing the t-shirts that I don't want to strike, but I will if I have to. I remember, and we took the t-shirts with us, and we met with Palestinian trade unions, and they sat wearing the t-shirts from our union. And this was kind of like the fall of 2016. This was really a very, very bad period for us because the Zionist attacks intensified on campus. And then in the fall 2017, there was the Horowitz posters against me and my students, not just me, my colleagues and my students that were put all over campus, and the university did nothing. And that's when I think this is when we deepened our collaboration. And I'm sure Ann has, my colleague, Dr. Robertson, has more to speak about that because she knows the history of the union. She has been a very solid supporter. We came together along with other members of the union, along with other members of the community, and we spoke about that. And I filed my first labor grievance in 2017, actually in January 2007, after 10 years of being at San Francisco State, due to the fact that it was intolerable. We were being threatened, we were receiving death threats. we're receiving voicemail. It was really, really getting bad. And that's also when there was more and more support, I believe. I want to also kind of like really thank and James and our executive board for the CFA San Francisco chapter in particular, because this is the third resolution. This resolution by San Francisco Labor Council is the third resolution. And I think it was you and twice who took them to the council, and they passed two resolutions before that. And this resolution actually demands that the university takes action, calls on the university president to take action. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is that, yes, and the reason that we are being attacked, and it's not really separate from what happened with the AFL-CIO, that sends an instruction to the San Francisco Labor Council that you are not allowed to discuss quote unquote international issues. The same thing actually that what they call the international sent to UAW Local 2865, the graduate students union of UC, who passed a resolution in support of, actually very binding, over 66% of students who actually supported the boycott, the divestment and sanctions movement. And then they received a decision from the international canceling, nullifying. This happened also with I guess CWU. This happened with many unions and so on, in the sense that the AFL-CIO actually very much like what the university is doing, is that on one hand, they want to prevent, they are gatekeepers because they have the relationship with the Histadrut, which has nothing to do with really trade union rights, especially as far as Palestinian, in terms of Israeli Jewish workers, but also in terms of Palestinians, because they take dues from Palestinians. They actually are supposed to turn over the dues to the Palestinian Authority through the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions. They hold on to it as a way to actually exert pressure on the Palestinians when they are supposed to be, and they don't defend, they don't provide healthcare, they don't provide service, they don't provide anything for Palestinian workers at all. They just take the money and then they go in front of the world saying that we represent workers. You're not representing workers. Actually, you're working against workers. You're supporting Israeli apartheid. You're supporting the way the Israeli state is going against the Palestinians. But the reason all of this is happening, and I think it's really, really important to mention 3 points. One is that there is an attempt to exceptionalize Palestine and set Palestine aside from everything else, because San Francisco Labor Council was also one of the first places that supported the anti-apartheid movement and the labor and CUSATU and the labor unions in South Africa. And the local ILWU of the Longshoremen Union actually supported several times, blocking the boat and supported the boarding of Zim lines in the port of Auckland. What they are trying to do is exceptionalize Palestine, saying that Palestine is different than anything else, because if you actually support Palestinian liberation, you are against Jews, you're anti-Semitic, you're against Jews, you hate the Jews, and so on and so forth, which is a very not only erroneous equation, because we know that there is larger and larger numbers of Jews who support Palestine. We know that Palestine is an international issue of justice. It's not about Jews and Arabs and so on. This is a falsehood. And we do know that historically, Jewish intellectuals and anti-Zionists have also spoken against Zionism. And we know that there is a problem with Zionism as a racist movement. So they try to exceptionalize, to equate the two. Two, the reason they're doing it is because they're losing. They are making our lives hellish. They are giving us such a hard time. They are threatening us with imprisonment. They're threatening us with death threats. They're saying they leave phone messages on my office, say that Jews will live, Muslims will die. They send me very nasty emails. One letter I actually received in my university address at the College of Ethnic Studies, saying that I'm a retired New York City detective. I'm not going to advocate violence, but I would advise you not to cross the street, not engage into an agreement, because you never know what will happen. I mean, this is kind of, and this happened again and again. Students have been beaten up, have been attacked again and again and again. Only this past week, Yeshiva University canceled a lecture I was supposed to go and give for students in the Cardozo School of Law that was organized by two young Jewish feminist law students. And Yeshiva University canceled, and then now they have 120 students signing their petition, 13 clubs, and so on. The reason this is happening is because Israel is losing the public relations battle that has been so important for it since its foundation. It's been part of the security, it's been part of the Mossad, it's been part of the Shin Bet, it's been part of its strategy to protect that, because if Israel gets labeled as B'Tselem, the Israeli Human Rights Organization, as Human Rights Watch, as Amnesty International, as an apartheid state, Israel can no longer go and get the support and get away practically and really with murder against Palestinians. So they're losing. So what they're trying to do, bullies do not accept defeat. Bullies try to get bullier, try to bully more, try to attack more, because they really would like to crush us. San Francisco State is doing the same thing, also is doing the similar things to the Labor Council, to the AFL-CIO, and so using technicalities, no quorum, changing the site of the meeting, changing the format of the meeting, saying you're not supposed to do this and do that, in order for them to participate in the losing battle to resuscitate the apartheid in Palestine that Israel is advocating against the Palestinians.
And you were going to add something about the contractual violations?
I just wanted to go back to that because San Francisco State University actually has a history of breaking contracts that it makes with professors that they are trying to lure to San Francisco State. This has happened in multiple situations where a particular faculty person is made promises by one university. They disrupt their life to move out to the Bay Area so that they can teach at San Francisco State. And then we get a new administration coming in that claims it has no need or moral obligation to uphold the promises made by a previous administration. And so several of our faculty members have had to go to the courts because of this breach of contract. The courts have ruled in favor of faculty, but what's so glaring is that the administration doesn't feel incorrectly that it either has a moral or a legal obligation to fulfill promises that have been made by the institution of San Francisco State. So it's a chronic problem, and the administration has a completely indefensible position. So I just wanted to emphasize that fact, because it's not only true of Professor Abdulhadi, but of multiple other faculty at San Francisco State.
And there's going to be an AFL-CIO convention in June of this year in Philadelphia. This issue of Professor Abdulhadi and what's going on at the AMED program could be brought up at that convention. Professor Martel, should this be a national issue in the labor movement beyond San Francisco, within the entire labor movement?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think questions of breach of contract and free speech are like endemic to all labor, not just academic labor. So I 100% think like this is an issue that should be of concern to the entire country and to the entire labor movement, and a very important one too. Lisa,
you are, I understand, running in a slate at the Labor Council around part of the issue is the role of the AFL-CIO in trying to prevent a discussion of the delegates on this issue of Palestine.
Basically, one of the main points of the slate that I'm running on with Cheryl Thornton from the SEIU and Brenda Barrios from SEIU is we're fighting for union democracy and transparency at all levels. And one of the first things we mention is that we should assert and defend the rights of our affiliate unions to be free from national AFL-CIO overreach, and mention the September letter, which states that the Labor Council was not to entertain resolutions of an international nature on issues that which the national AFL-CIO has already taken a position on, which goes contrary to the history of the San Francisco Labor Council, which took positions against the Vietnam War back in 1968, as well as other important points in which they were also correct. And it violates also this decision, basically rolling over to the national AFL-CIO violates the rights of the affiliate unions to be able to express their points of view in a unified manner on matters that are important to them. That's one of the first issues that we have on the slate, including the role of the AFL-CIO's involvement in interventions in Latin America, such as they did in Chile back in 1971, 72, and in Venezuela as well. So all of those different issues, we need to make sure that rank and file members are kept informed. We have an education component here that's very important because all of this thing, none of the rank and file members are really informed about anything. And, I give regular, announcements during the general meetings of my union regarding what's happening at the Labor Council, but somehow or another, there's this secrecy that we're not supposed to be telling people about what's going on. And that's not something that I'm willing to participate in.
Okay, and Professor Tomomi, Kinukawa, one of the issues is denialism of history, and the denialism of Palestinians, the denialism of the comfort women. It seems there's more and more an effort to suppress the real history of people around the world and in this country. Is this connected to other struggles?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So before I started to collaborating with Dr. Abdulhadi, I was in the struggle that you're in, Steve, too, that it's called Comfort Women Justice Movement in San Francisco and beyond. And we were fighting for right-wing Japanese governments, the historical denialism, especially, I mean, like they are denying many colonial violences, but especially we were focusing on what is called Japanese military sexual slavery system, and that's so-called comfort women system, and the denialists, Japanese denialists, that try to like advocate their position, not only in Japan, but globally here in the United States too. And when we were trying to build the memorial in San Francisco, there was opposition by the Japanese government. And those denialists were also in academia. And like there's a Harvard law professor who takes up like the denialist position and like works with denialists in Japan, and like and serves like a University of Tokyo, like advisor to the University of Tokyo and so forth. And those denialists in Japanese denialists actually model after Zionists, and like there is an actual link between them, so there are like a major like the diehard Japanese Zionists actually are pro-Israel Zionist and running an organization, like a friendship organization in Tokyo. And so I think that's about just one example, but and then like white supremacist right wing, the organizations and the individuals in the US, like they are all feeding each other, so I think our struggles are, they're connected. I think like first and foremost, like through our principle of indivisibility of justice, but also I think we need to address the ways in which the governments collude each other, and also university administration collude each other, like think tanks and like many and also state departments and the tech companies. All these are colluding each other to suppress knowledge and then legitimize their apartheid and like a illegal colonial occupation of Palestine, and also deny the history of Japanese imperialism and ongoing racist discrimination, and also colonization of of Okinawa and so forth. And so so I think it is it's been like a powerful to move into work in those movements, and like that does build solidarity, so we could and connect voices which are usually suppressed by the white supremacist narratives, dominant narratives, and so that, and I think that actually goes back to the open classrooms that Dr. Abdulhadi has been doing for decades, and that in those classrooms we invite Dr. Abdulhadi has been inviting many luminaries and like many community leaders and like thinkers, and that's the space where these conversations connecting different decolonial movements and building solidarity that has been happening, and I've been really honored to take part in, more recent some of the open classrooms. And we are actually trying to do an open classroom that connects focuses on gender and sexual violence in Palestine, and also the comfort women issue and the historical denialism in April. So.
Well, it sounds like we've covered real connection between the struggle of worker rights, labor rights, censorship, academic freedom, and the need to get this history out, which apparently the Zionists and others really do not want out. So I think this fight in the labor movement is absolutely critical. And I want to thank all of you for joining us in this discussion about not only this case at San Francisco State, but the international struggle of working people from here to Palestine, to Japan, Okinawa, all around the world, and the need to get unions involved in that struggle to educate that these issues are connected. So I want to thank you all for joining us on Work Week.